So with the negotiation process, like we said, it's about coming down as close as you can to the number you want to reach. And the main goal is to not get emotional, like I said, just to recap, and to kind of stay the course with the number you want to reach and understand to be reasonable enough and respectful enough with the dealers to get to that number. So I know most dealers are crooks. Like that's just a reality. Most dealers are out to make a profit and they don't really give two shits about you, even though they pretend. So the goal though, even though that's the case, the person that is selling you the car, it might be a really nice guy. There's no need to treat him as if he's the dealership. The number one mistake people make is they get very aggressive. When they go to the negotiation room with the dealer, they feel like they're being taken advantage of, so they're there to start a fight. There's no need to fight, there's no need to get angry. The bottom line is dealer wants to sell you a car. If you're naturally and really ready to buy a car, the dealer will know that and will work with you to try to sell you a car. If he can't sell you a car, it's because you're asking for something that's not making him enough profit. Now, that said, there are certain things dealers won't do. They won't go below their profit margins they're supposed to make on each car, and they won't just give away shit for free because they like you. So that's just kind of like the reality of how things work in the dealer world. You have to go in and you're making a purchase based upon your ability to buy that car and your readiness to buy that car. And the dealer will recognize that and will work out a deal for you that is based on their readiness to sell that car, based on how long they've had that car. If they've held that car only 30 days, then they're somewhat likely to want to move it. If they've held it 60 days, they're very likely to want to move it. If they've had it 90 days, then they're very much ready to liquidate and getting the hell out of there. So there's a few things you need to keep in mind. First off, why does someone have a car more than 90 days? You need to do your inspections, do your routines, do your searching, and understand a lot about the car. See the car. Like there's a reason the car hasn't left, especially if the deal seems too good to be true. Pay attention to that. Just because Carfax says it hasn't been an accident doesn't mean it hasn't. We ended up buying an Aston Martin years ago that was a Katrina car. Like it had been somewhat repainted because it was completely flooded twice. Like the car wasn't flooded, but the paint had been damaged from, rock chips and severe weather conditions. Nowhere on the reports anywhere. Technically, that car should have been a total loss, but someone repainted it, resold it. It sat at a dealership for 2 years. We thought we were getting the best deal ever. And the paint was done on the whole car, so the paint meter didn't catch any imperfections. It was done right. But the thing is, even though it was done right, even though we profited from the car, I still felt at the end, I was like, well, we kind of got cheated. The dealer knew. I had a feeling he knew something he wasn't telling me. So that's kind of like the way dealerships work. Their goal is to sell you a car. Their goal is to move you into a car. That you like it or not, they want you in that car. So if you do want the car, and if it is the right car, then be respectful and start finding common ground with the dealership. The best way to find common ground is you have a number in your head. They have a number in their head. Come as close as you can to the number in yours. And when you get to a point where you're okay, where you have that margin, where you're comfortable, make the deal. Be ready to sign the paper, be ready to act today, be ready to put a deposit, and you'll get a lot further in your negotiations. Don't negotiate people down only to not call them again. First off, because later when there's a car at the dealership, you're not going to want to deal with these people again. They'll remember you. And then two, you also want to make sure that if there is the right car at the right place, you're also not losing it because you're just trying to practice for yourself how to become a negotiator. The best thing to do is to go in and again, like I said, stick to your number until you actually get in. The dealer will come at you with several things. They'll send you the idea of, I'll meet you halfway through, like I said earlier. So what they'll do is they'll tell you that, you want a number, I want a number. So let's go halfway and I'll show good faith on your part. That's all bullshit. It's part of the whole process. They'll also come at you with, we've had many calls in this car. A lot of dealers are such imbeciles that they actually think that we were born yesterday. So they'll come up with things like, hey, I went to see a 458 and the moron that was selling me that car actually told me, he's like, oh, I've got 4 calls in that car today. And I'm like, wow, like how incredible. This car's been sitting for 4 months, right? And now my luck is the day I come see this car, you've had 4 calls on the same exact car, right? So here's a few things about people who lie. The patterns are the same. They use the same numbers all the time. If the car's been sitting 4 months and you just mentioned that, they've had 4 calls. That's the first thing that you need to understand about people who lie, especially at dealerships. They're not creative. They're technically retarded. So what they do is they find through memory what they've just heard recently and convert it into a lie. And so what ends up happening is if you hear a lot of the same numbers thrown around, then just know that the whole conversation is complete bullshit. And so, you don't need to point it out and be like, you're a liar. No, The goal is for you to buy the car, right? So use that at your advantage. Understand that the person selling you the car is unreasonable and a complete imbecile, so it can work in your favor. So then understand what your number is and stick to it. If you're willing to walk out and the dealer says, this is my bottom line, this is my bottom line, but you're still not, they're still not letting you walk out, it's because it's not their bottom line. So you need to make it clear. I usually walk in the dealership, I'm very clear, right with the salesperson. I want to be around this number. Anything further than this number is not good for me. Now, they'll tell me things, I can't sell it to you at this number, but we're pretty close. I said, fine, I'll go listen. If they're pretty close, is like $1,000 or $2,000 away, there's room, they'll probably get to my number. If they're pretty close, is $6,000-$7,000 away, probably never gonna get to my number. But if I can come up 1,000 and they can come down 5, it may still work, right? It just depends how badly I want the car. So these are some of the strategies that dealers use, especially at the sales office. They run everything through their managers, and the minute you want to leave, they're like, let me introduce you to my general manager or my sales manager and this and that. And so all of these are strategies used to keep you there and keep you aggravated that you've already spent so much time talking to them. You don't want to start this process all over again at a different dealership because your time is worth something and they realize that. And so they love wasting it. So just try to understand that that's a strategy. Don't take it personally. Go into the dealership and expect to spend hours there, especially if you're going to actually buy a car. That's how they work. So once you actually get to that place when you're about to buy the car and you actually have come to somewhat of a good agreement or somewhere where you're comfortable enough to make a deal, sign your buyer's order and then head over to the finance office. In the finance office, you're going to be offered an array of products, which if you're halfway intelligent, you'll go ahead and decline all of them because I've told you why you shouldn't buy any of them and you can probably buy them for much cheaper elsewhere. Later on in Car Conspiracy, depending on when you're watching this, at the beginning or not, we'll actually reach out to some of these best warranty companies, gap companies, and so on and so forth, and give you the access to some of these products at the core price, so you don't have to pay dealer profits. But for now, if you must buy some of these products, negotiate them down. If not, let's entirely go away from any of these affiliate aftermarket products. The only thing, and don't ever buy that paint protection crap. It's complete bullshit. It's not real. It's like some imbecile waxing your car with some extra coats of wax and charging you $800 and telling you they'll re-wax it again for free if it ever goes away. It's completely stupid, and you can get it done for a fraction of the cost somewhere else if you really wanted it. It's all a hoax. It's all this like bunch of crap that they're built to sell you out. So don't buy any of that stuff. And then when you're actually there and you're ready to make your move, just remember the finance office wants to make money off your financing and auxiliary products. If they can't make money off of auxiliary products, then they're going to want to make money off your financing. Your financing is really, really important for you to know how to negotiate that down. Now, remember, at this point, you're playing stupid. You lower the price of the car through the financing rate. That means if they're offering you a high rate, then you tell them you can't afford that payment, you'd like to go it lower. They'll lower the rate to a degree where they can because they'd rather make money on the car than the rate. But when they've lowered the rate to that point where they can't go any further, you still being able to afford this car or not can still depend on the price of the car. So just remember this. This is the best, absolutely best time for you to be able to, at this very moment, start negotiating the car price down even further. Let's say they're at $400, I'll give you a good example. Let's say they're at $510 on the payment and you want to be under $500. So you can tell them, hey, unfortunately, I can't buy this car. It's a question of principle. For myself, like I promised myself, I wouldn't have a payment over $500 and I don't want to break that promise to myself. I have my limits, so do you. So I really can't buy this car if you can't get me a rate lower to get me closer to $500. Now, the dealer at this point, the finance manager at this point, it doesn't have time because now you're wasting his time. And his time is really important because the more deals they move, the more he closes deals throughout the day. So he has to move you out of his office, like with haste, ultimately not wasting time signing. Unless he's selling you more products, he doesn't want you in his office. So when you're ear fucking him about the actual price of the car at this point, he doesn't want you in there. He wants you out of there. He's going to go straight to the general sales manager, tell him exactly what he wants to do for you and see if he can do it. So he's going to walk over there and he's going to say, look, I need to lower the car price another like $2,000 to get this guy where he's to get him at. Can I do it? General manager will say, no, try to get him at 1,000, whatever. So he'll come back and say, look, I've talked to him. They'll cut you an extra 1,000 off and it'll be like 502. Is that okay? So you'll say, yes, it's fine. And now you just got another $1,000 off the car, closer to the number you actually wanted to be out of instead of the number they wanted. Now, at this point, the salesperson has no idea, so he's not even involved. He doesn't know his commission just got cut even further. So it has nothing to do with anybody other than you are getting the deal you want at the price you want. And then here are some important things. make sure that, especially if the deal was good, the car was good, make sure to leave outstanding customer reviews for your dealerships. Those things matter for them. And make sure you let them know that you've left them amazing reviews, because you're going to come back and you're going to buy more cars from them in the future. Make sure that you're taking care of the dealer in that way at the very least. So he may not have made as much money as he wanted on you, but at the very least he got a great rating out of it, especially if they treated you fairly and they weren't, poor in the way they handled the situation, or they manage the paperwork process or anything else. And that also opens up good communication in the future. If you have such problems as title work, or there's issues with, like having registered the lien holder on the car, or anything else, it's going to be easier to have an open communication channel with someone at that dealership, so that you're no longer a stranger and they know you've left them a good review. And so you have somewhat of a more personable approach rather than just a whatever approach. So that's just kind of the gist of how to become an expert negotiator. It's very simple. The main key ingredients, again, know your numbers, know your deals locally, and then understand also that you have to be respectful to your dealers. And finally, understand that all the negotiation doesn't need to happen up front. Some of it can happen on the back end, but the majority needs to happen in the sales office. I often get a question that asks me, should you buy lemon or salvage cars? I often get asked because, obviously you can get much better deals on cars that have had lemons. What a lemon is a car that's been bought back by a manufacturer because of a defect that couldn't be fixed after numerous amounts of attempts by a dealership. So in other words, you bought let's say a really nice Audi, and the navigation system was continuously broken for like 4 consecutive times. And in California, after 4 times, you can technically ask the manufacturer to buy it back from you or get a different one. And the manufacturer is obligated to do that. So in certain cases, certain cars end up being lemons. Weird glitches, so the car gets sent back to the manufacturer fixes it, puts it back on the market. That dings the title. So that leaves a mark on the title, and therefore that title ends up knowing that the car was manufactured buyback. Doesn't necessarily impact your financing. Some banks don't like them, but most banks don't really care. So you have your manufacturer buyback on there, but because of that, the price of the car comes lower. Like it ends up becoming an auction car, and you usually can buy it back for a lot cheaper than it originally is worth on the market. Usually it's like 10-15% cheaper, which is a big difference on a higher end exotic, but not so much on a Volvo or something. In terms of like salvage cars, that's when the title salvaged from a flood or something, could have been fixed perfect, but stay away from those cars. Banks won't finance them. They're terrible cars in general because they've been crashed, and even though they may look normal at sight and they may inspect perfect, they may run perfect, I just don't see the long-term value unless the deal is so good that you can resell the deal to someone else. But these are cash cars and very hard to move, especially if they're still damaged. So I would just stay away in general from salvage cars altogether. They're just not good buys. And then for the lemon cars, I would look at it on a case-by-case basis. But if you're looking to buy a car, keep it for a really long time. And this is like, you're not seeing this program in order to flip a car for a profit. You're doing it in order to be able to take the car and ultimately just drive it and enjoy it and just save good money on it. Then I would consider that to be a very, very decent thing to do if you want to buy a like lemon car at some point that's been fixed. I would personally stay away from them, but it doesn't mean they're all bad. If you can negotiate a deal down enough, then it makes sense. When you say down enough, how much do I mean is the difference to take? I would say if there's more than a 15% gap between the price, the further down you can bring a normal car to the further down you can bring a lemon car. And remember, compare apples to apples. Then at that point, I would consider the lemon, assuming that you're going to keep the car for a long time and not really sell it or flip it or trade it or anything else. I had an opportunity to buy SLS that was lemon, and I choose not to, simply because that's a car that's more prestigious, and I don't think a lot of people would appreciate that on it. It sat for a while. They eventually sold. It sold for about less than 8% under market value, which really wasn't that big of a deal for me to buy a lemon car. So it wasn't a right fit, and in most cases it isn't. But just some heads up that I would stay away from those, just to answer most of people's questions that have been emailing me. All right, so here we're going to cover the two-owner myth. There's a lot of people that seem to believe that if a car has more than one owner or two owner, if it's used, it was a terrible car and nobody wanted it. That's completely untrue, and it's complete bullshit. So whoever told you that was lying. Whatever car is out there sometimes can have 10, 15 owners. It could even have two, especially in the exotic car market. a lot of people don't keep their cars that long. When a car first hits the market, like right now the Huracan is pretty like hot, and some of these other like exotics, the i8, there's going to be people that buy that car just to resell it. So within a matter of like the first 3 months, it's going to have 3 owners because it just moved hands until someone got the money they wanted out of it. So just remember that just because like a car has multiple owners does not state that it's a bad car. Especially if it's been out for a while, it's okay for it to have more than one owner, and it doesn't mean there's something negative like about it. The SL55 you saw earlier in our case study had 3 owners. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, on any level. Now, if you look at the ownership, a lot of times you'll be able to understand who's an independent dealer and who's not. Because even though it'll show a registration renewal, it won't actually show a service history. It won't have been kept that long. It'll just have been moved. And it's often moved to another dealership. So you can see where the wholesalers get their hands on these cars. And they're not necessarily owners of cars or bad owners or anything else. The big problems here that you want to look for are when some of these cars, in terms of service history, on the Carfax we looked at earlier, you want to go ahead and make sure that you're taking a look at that Carfax and that you're not seeing the repeated history of the same warranty repairs. There is nothing worse than a car that's been in the service bay 6 times for the same thing and every time shows repaired. That means that somehow is a lemon that slipped through the cracks and that's never become actually marked as a lemon, but you're about to buy a car that could leave you with a ton of problems. Now, if it had problems back in 2008 and now it's 2014 and since then there has been no issues, then you're okay. Those are not the cars to worry about. The cars to worry about is where that service history shows constant follow through of the same problem. You'll say something like convertible top checked or electrical system checked, and it'll say that for no reason every like 2,000 miles for like a year. So those are the kind of cars that have had continuous issues like multiple sensor issues and so on and so forth. And there's a reason for that. So you need to kind of investigate that process and make sure that you're not completely screwed out of it. Like you definitely want to make sure that you understand why certain things happen certain ways so that you're not kind of bamboozled into like, oh, well, I bought this car and then as soon as you buy it, it's leaving a ton of repair on you. So just remember that 2-owner cars, 3-owner cars, 4-owner cars, it's all okay. What's really bad is if you have a car that's had an owner every 3 months and it keeps changing hands and there's no real reason why. Those are the cars you want to be cautious of and you want to kind of look at. And yeah, if a car has 10 owners, it's obviously not going to be as high value retail car as a car that's had 1 owner the whole time with perfect service history, etc. So the main issues with having multiple owners is lack of services and lack of documents or transparency. And so you don't really know why that's happening. So being extra cautious in these cases and taking extra time to review the cars is very, very important.
All right, so let's look at the negotiation process as it's a key part of this system, just like it's a key part of the watch system. The idea here is that we have to become negotiation experts in order to be able to bring the actual prices down rather than just throwing a lowball number that's not going to get us very far. So ideally, you have to understand the negotiation process and how to become a great negotiator. Thankfully, we cover it all here. All right, so how to become a negotiator? Part 1, let's look at the history and current pricing asked. What is the history of the car? What are we looking for, right? We're looking at the Carfax to understand history. What is history? We want to know when was the in-service date. Is it an early model 07 or late model 07? We want to know if the records, was it a dealer serviced car or was it kind of serviced at independent shops? Are all the records listed on the Carfax or do you need separate records? Let's also look at if there were any accidents, even though not all would be listed, but obviously we're going to have an idea if some are listed or where accidents that were documented anyways. So we're looking for that as well into the Carfax. We want to make sure that that's also there. So next, we want to understand the current market data. What does that mean? We want to do research on all the sites I told you about, Craigslist, eBay, AutoTrader, and some of these forums, and understand what is the market doing on that car. So we price our car at $20,500, for example. We'll look at other cars across the US and factor in the shipping cost into that too. So you would say coast to coast, you're looking at $1,000. Halfway through the United States, you're looking at roughly $500. Add those to the prices if they're far from you, and then decide, if the car you have is priced well to market, and is the dealer going to argue with you that they have the lowest priced car in the country, or are they actually priced high, and therefore you can make a good argument that you can have the same car elsewhere. Understand the car you're actually trying to purchase. Don't just say, I'm trying to purchase a 750 BMW. There's no difference between the Li and I. That's not true. The Li and I have different markets. So, there's different people looking for different cars, and there's different option lists that come with both cars. And typically Li models are more loaded to begin with than I models. So what does that all mean? That means that you need to particularly pay attention to the fact that when you're purchasing a car, you're not just purchasing that model. You have to make sure you understand that the options included do make a difference. I had a BMW M6 that I showed you earlier. That car had more options than any other M6 out there. It had soft closed doors on an 07, super rare option. It had carbon trim, leather dashboard, all of these things that typically cost a lot of money. So my M6 was worth more than other people's M6 selling on the market. And so it was comparing apples to oranges if you're considering a base model M6 versus the one I was selling. Understand how competitive the market is. What does that mean? Gauge how many cars are for sale within, that 1,000-mile radius or within the United States. So understand how on demand this particular car is. So what is the supply and demand of this car? If you're looking at Lamborghini Gallardos, do a search on these sites and see that maybe there's only 3 cars available in the same year, the same range of years, and the same type of mileage as yours. Gauge how many choices will the buyer have really at that given time that they themselves are looking. Most buyers look on all those channels, and so therefore it's important to know, what are you going up against, right? Understand very well how competitive the market's going to be. And so if there's a lot of cars on the market, you're going to have more leverage to negotiate the price down. If there isn't a lot of cars on the market, then you're not going to have that leverage. But again, this can play both ways, that you're the buyer or the seller. Right now we're looking at how to negotiate the buy. So understand the value and what the asking price is. So understand what the actual car is, so you don't fall for that gimmick that it's listed on Kelley Blue Book for X amount of money and we're selling it 10,000 under. Kelley Blue Book doesn't mean shit. Dealers use what they call Manheim, Riverside, and pretty much auction pricing, which means if they have to dump the car overnight, how much would a wholesaler buy it from them for? That's what dealers look at. That's what matters to them. So ultimately, when they're gauging a car's value to them, that's its cash value. And then look at how do you understand that value? Well, either you have a friend that's in the dealer business, if you can make one, that's very helpful. 2, on all these forums, if you make friends, a lot of them have access to Manheim listings and can tell you what these cars are selling for at auction. And then understand where or how far the asking price is from that value price, so that you can understand that the dealer needs to make money, but then not that much money, and there should be somewhere okay. Now remember that, again, supply and demand dictates what these cars sell for. So in 07, maybe that 2004, 2005 car, in 07, it was maybe selling for, 30,000, but in 08, even though it's older, more people want them because maybe they're discontinued, so now they're selling for more. So understand that it's not just the older the car, the cheaper it is, and it keeps depreciating. You have to understand each of these components that we covered earlier and what makes a car sellable. Understand the dealer. That's a key part before negotiating a deal. Understand who is going to be sitting at the opposite side of the negotiation. So how do you do that? You monitor other cars from the dealer. What do I mean by that? You look at the dealer's inventory on eBay, right? So you look at what they're selling one car that you want, fine. But you don't want to see that car because you're not going to see what the steps are, right? Look back at some of these other cars, past sold, or follow the trends on some of their other cars on their inventory now and see what they sell for and they go for and what they're letting them go for. So what I mean is, if they started, for example, they start their bid at 28 and they're listing the car for 36, buy it now, you want to gauge what they're letting it go for. Most likely, they're letting it go for higher than the bid price because that's the value of the car plus the already built-in fees. So they already have 1,000 or 2 above that little threshold number that they put out there. So think about that as okay, what do they need to make to let this car go? And can they make that, and can I buy a bargain enough to resell it after I drive it? If it's a match, then that's a good dealer to go after. But understand how much overhead the dealer has. Some dealers, like AutoNation dealers, usually in most of the high-end cars can have up to $10,000, $12,000 markups. On some of the lower ones, they only have $3,000 markup. And so it's really going to depend on the car. But most dealers have at least a $3,000 to $5,000 markup into the cars, especially since we're talking about luxury or exotic cars. And they need to make a minimum of 3 to let the car go. So you've got to consider that. So understand 15, 30, and 45-day pricing rules. What does that mean? That means after 15 days, the dealer lowers the price of their car. After 30 days, they lower it again. And after 45 days, they drop the price again. The idea is the dealer wants to get rid of their cars. But again, what the dealer does is gradually brings down the price. You may look on the Carfax and you can tell when the dealer actually acquired a car, because it says vehicle offered for sale and has the name of the dealer that owns it. Look at that, and then from there, understand the 15, 30, and 45-day marks. Mark them on your calendar, and then take a look at the prices at those marks. Contact the dealer. Ask just randomly. You don't have to identify yourself. Just be like, hey, I saw this car listed. What's the asking price? And just keep track of that price going down. Usually, your best bet is between 45 to 60 days that a car's been sitting is really the best time to potentially engage in and actually buy it. I bought a 750i in this rule when the dealer had it listed for like 24.2. That's where it started. I made an offer of 21 on it, which was way lower. And at the time, the market called for 22, 23K on that car. I made an offer of 21 on it. Dealer didn't call me back. Called me 45 days later. Said, I accept your offer. I said, I'm not interested anymore. I want for 20 now. So he ended up giving me the car. I got it for almost $5,000 off what the asking price was, and about, it was probably $1,000 to $1,500 under market value. And the mileage were good, condition was excellent. I could have driven that car for quite some time if I wanted to before actually selling it. I ended up moving it fairly quickly, but nonetheless, you can do that or you can keep, So part 2, show willingness to buy today. Dealers care. They want to know you're going to buy a car. They don't want to hassle their lowest price if you're not going to buy. So every dealer will tell you, what is it going to take to make a deal today? What they want is they want the answers to what is it going to take for you to get in a car today, not tomorrow, not the next day, today. They want to sell you a car today. So how can they do that? That's what they want, They want to buy, they want to sell you a car today. So what can you do to show them you're serious? If they want to do a loan application because you're going to get a loan, let them run it. If you're really serious about buying it, right? And you want them to give you the loan for it, let them run your credit. Let them give you the actual approval so they know now you're serious about doing it. I sometimes get approved for a loan before I even purchase a car just to show my intention, especially if it's like on the weekend or something, and I don't have access to maybe my, moving money around and buying a car cash, or I may want to finance a car. I do so by letting them know that I'm approved, so that way it's easy for them to then say, okay, wait a minute. So now we can go ahead and sell him this car today if we really wanted to. All he would have to do is sign. Call dealer and ask car-related questions. So don't call the dealer throwing a figure out there. No dealer will take you seriously. If you're like, your car's at 25, I give you like 19 grand for it. They'd be like, okay, have a good day, buddy. But, some of the main things there, ask things like, ask things like, has it been an accident? Are there any repairs? Like, talk about the car, right? Take interest in the car, not about the deal. Because, if you're really serious about buying a car, then you should be concerned about what the car is that you're thinking of buying, right? So get concerned with that and let it mean something, if that makes sense. So, buy that car, right? And then make sure that when you're there to buy it, ask questions about the car itself. When you go on the test drive, look at options that come with the car. Make a relevant conversation regarding the car itself and the options it has rather than the price. You never want to call and discuss price on the phone without seeing the car unless you've done your due diligence looking up the car and know everything about it and express that to the dealer as well, especially if you're not local. But if you're local, you should be able to go there, inspect the car first, and then make an offer on it. That's only fair to the dealer, and it only shows your seriousness. The willingness to buy will get you a smaller price. So if price is flexible, if you buy today, of course, it's always is. The question is how much? You don't know. Go back to your 30, 40 your 15, 30, 45, 60-day rules and understand how eager is the dealer to sell this car. If he just got it yesterday, he probably doesn't want to take $5,000 less than his asking price. But if he got it a month and a half ago and he hasn't had that many inquiries on it, he might be very likely to take your awesomely low offer on it. So always act as if you're undecided between two models, but you're ready to buy today. So, and when you point out another model, point out a model that is of a different year, but of better value. This will show you're a smart consumer and you're ready to purchase. And then, like I said earlier, make sure you actually go in the dealership and participate so that people can make sure that you're actually into the car and you know what it is, so you're not confused, and therefore you can actually continue to move forward. All right, part 3, understand the car you're actually buying. Go on the test drive, feel out the car, look out for any wear and tear like we talked about, look for the tires, the brakes ran down, look for any belts ran down. This isn't hard, just Google it, you'll find out how to do that. Look for buttons, play with every single buttons. Like this is, I can't stress enough, put a CD in the CD player, play the radio, go from the radio to the CD, use the steering controls, use the backup controls, use everything there is to understand exactly how this car works and if any buttons are not working or anything not working. Many of the shades in BMWs I've bought in the back for the 7 and the 5 Series, just constantly broken. But again, if who plays with the shades, play with them, play with everything on the car. Open the trunk, close it with the boot closer, close it manually, see what happens, you know? Definitely go through these things and double check to make sure that all the buttons are working. Because if not, you can always lower the price of the car again. So ask about records, keys, and books. There's always should be 2 keys with every car. If not, get a discount, $500 to $600 per key. Ask about service history. If the dealer has them, again, put the dealer at a disadvantage, showing him he usually doesn't have these things. So make them feel like you're really looking for that car you're willing to buy today, but you really needed service history and things that they're not having or provide. Inspect maintenance items like brakes and tires like we talked about, and if possible, PPI the car for a clutch. These things matter. Before you spend $300, $400 PPI in the car, make sure, absolutely make sure that the dealer would agree to your price, because if not, you don't want to spend that money. And then look for dings, dents, or any accident marks. Accident marks would be if the fenders are not aligned perfectly or around the edges where the bumper would have been painted. It won't be smooth, so it looks like it's an additional layer on top of the paint and then showing wear. All right, so now let's look at what you actually negotiate. Do you negotiate the lowest price on the car, or do you negotiate for that car? You negotiate value, not price. What does that mean? Again, you are not there to beat the lowest possible price car on the market with this negotiation tactic. You are there to get the best deal on the particular vehicle that you are trying to purchase. That vehicle may be worth more than a lower price vehicle elsewhere. So it's important to know you're only here to purchase the right product at the right price, not at the lowest price. Do not lowball the dealer. Do not make a lower initial offer than you want just to, do not make a low offer without actually seeing the car, but do make an initial offer a little bit lower than you would want to pay, but not that far off. So in other words, you want to pay $25 for the car, offer $23 so that the dealer offers $26 and then you get closer to $25. Don't throw out lowball numbers to dealers. They know you're not serious at that point. You just want to steal a car, and they're in business to make money, not to give you cars for free. Make an offer aligned with other cars for sale. Again, define your offer based on what else you've seen in the market, based on the condition of the car, based on the options of the car, and then make sure you let them know that you're urgently ready to buy the car because you've driven others and you need a car now. So it's their opportunity to earn your business at once. Important. So understand, this is really important. So understand the dealer must make money. So dealers are in business to make money. They are not in business to just give you free cars. If they pay $28,000 for a car, they're selling it to you at $28,000. Well, guess what? They're losing. They have to pay the salesman a commission. They have to actually go out and book the tech for like 2 hours to look it over. So they're losing money. They don't do that. They'd rather send it to the auction than be known for losing money. So allow dealers to counter offer you. When you've made an offer and it's a little bit lower, don't just say, oh, okay, you didn't accept it, have a good day. Just, they're going to come back with a counter offer, re-counter offer again. Again, make the belief that it's too high for you. Make it seem like you can't afford it. You cannot afford it goes a lot further than I don't want to pay this for this car. Do not down talk the car. That means don't just say, well, this car sucks or the color is terrible. I don't really want it for that price. Rather, if you've seen something's wrong with it or it's missing options, just do make it a very fair and honest conversation to just say, hey, you know what? I've seen the same car in a more desirable color for me. And I've noticed that one also has massaging seats, this and that. And unfortunately, to me, that's worth the extra $1,000. So I'd rather go that way, unless you can lower your car by X and X amount, you know? And if the dealer is willing, they'll do it. Like if they see your willingness to buy today, they'll most likely make the deal better today, you know? And like I said, don't expect them to give away the car. It never really happens. Very rarely does that happen. And when it does, someone gets in trouble, so don't do it often again. Now, again, every dealer is going to tell you they're already losing money on that deal, so they can't do it. They can't do it. So don't buy that bullshit. Dealers don't lose money on deals. So if they're telling you that, it's only a strategy like, oh, yeah, I've reduced it 5 times. I'm already taking a loss. No, you're not. That's the idea of being a dealer. When you're a large dealer, you buy volume, so you get significant discounts. And so the idea is also when you buy volume, you also have very experienced wholesalers that sell you a lot of cars very cheap. So if you're that guy and you're buying this stuff like at a fairly reasonable, cheap rate, you just want to really make sure, like really make sure that you're not losing money on cars. And so they don't really do losses of money on cars. And even though that's what they try to tell you so that you kind of walk out there like, oh man, like he really gave me a good deal. Well, he really didn't. So don't buy that stuff. You might earn yourself a good deal by negotiating your own deal, but you're not going to get it just because the dealer told you you're getting an amazing deal. So be ready to make a deal. This is the key part because you never know when the dealers are going to accept your offer. Sometimes something may seem too good to be true for you, but remember, the dealer must move it, so they will take your deal. And if you get the deal, make sure you make it. Don't be ready there to be like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll come back, or I'll have to get financing. Once you get into the finance office, if you're doing it there, you'll negotiate with the business office too. But for now, if you get the deal you want, make it, take it, and go forward with it. If you don't get approved in the finance office, it's a different story. You might want to reconsider that next time, but you definitely want to make the deal once you actually get the deal you want. So there's always a little bit more to shave off, and we're going to talk about that, about how the financing helps you shave off more money off the deal. And then definitely don't buy any warranties, any of that special protection for your car keeps it new for like 5 years bullshit. Don't fall for any of that. It's a total waste of fucking money. We'll find other ways that, you can make sure you shave off the financing. So why should it make sense to finance the deal? Well, interest rates are low enough, like I talked about earlier. You definitely want to use someone else's money if you can borrow at less than 3%, and actually drive the car you want without actually losing money. That money you could have in bulk could be used for other things. And you can always pay it off at any time if you want with very minimal interest paid on the car anyways. So it's a win-win ultimately for you to finance the deal. The dealer makes money off the financing like we talked about. In most cases, the dealer will make 0.5 point to 1.5 points, sometimes 2 points on your deal. Meaning they'll go back to the bank, and if you hold the deal for 6 months and you make your payments, the dealer will get paid from the bank back for giving them that lead or that particular client. There's a lower price on the car usually if you finance because they know they're going to make that other part. So if you are smart enough to convey your intention to finance, the dealer might be more lenient to let it go lower because they know that on the back end they're going to make money, especially if you're approved already. And then again, like I said, the low rate environment is key, and it allows you to keep more cash in your pocket today. Now, if rates were above 5% across the board, I would tell you that that's probably not a great idea. And you should consider each and every scenario differently. But I think under 5% deals like they are now, it just makes good business sense to go this direction. But let's go back for a second here and talk about financing, because I forgot to tell you something. So when you're financing the deal, one of the things that really matters, that really makes the biggest difference is once you're in that finance office, right? And you're about to make that purchase, they're going to tell you what your monthly payments are. They're going to ask you for how much cash you want to put down. First off, put the least amount of cash possible down. The value of the car should never be an issue because you are actually buying a car well below its wholesale value, in which banks only look at really retail and private party value. They don't really look at wholesale values as the way they do financing. So in some cases, they even go to 120% of retail. So you should have plenty of equity, according to the bank, in the car if you're making the right deal. If you're not, reconsider the deal you're making. So if once you go to that finance office and you put the least amount of money down and someone says, well, your payment's like $400 a month, play it off as if you're stupid. Be like, I would like my payment to be $80 a month. If you really want the car and you've really haggled the deal down, just take whatever they give you. But if you want to shave a little bit more off the car, just kind of from the beginning be like, I want my payment to be like $350 or $380, knowing that it's probably going to come out at $400 because you did your homework. And then throughout, just ask them, like, how much money do I need down for this? How much money do I need down for that? And kind of continuously go back and forth on the fact that you cannot afford your monthly payment and you don't have any cash to give them for money down. You see, the dealer doesn't care that you're poor or not. All the dealer wants to do is move a car. He doesn't give a shit you're going to get it repoed or not. What the dealer wants is to move a car, right? So what you want to do is make sure that you get to a point where, hey, look, I can't afford it. I don't want to do this. Like, I can't put any money down. So, and they're like, well, what can you afford? You'd be like, well, I can afford $350. They'll be like, that's impossible. And be like, you know, if you can even come to $370, $380, I might do it. Then the dealer will find a way to do it. Either to lower the points they have in your financing to bring it down so the rate lower. And don't be afraid to ask. Like, let's say they tell you your rate's 5.5, right? And you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Don't say that. Instead, focus and say, well, wait, I've seen rates last time I'm at bank for 3.9. Can you not match that? So when you have things like that, you make the dealer work harder. They'll automatically drop half a point from there. Just naturally, they'll be like, yeah, I think we can, you know, and honestly, what they were trying to do is stick you for the most amount of money they can make off of finance. So on the back end, just remember that, you know, if they're not making as much there, so that's one thing where your rate's going to bring your payment down. And then two, the other thing you really want to see happen is, well, can the price be lowered a little bit? Can you get a little bit better to get me closer to where I need to be? And that's when you hit them the way it works. And that's when you actually take the car home for the least amount possible. So how does buying privately now make a little bit of a difference? The negotiation points are very different. The way they're different is because when you're buying privately, again, the margins are not as high and you're dealing with someone who's emotionally connected to their car and their investment. So someone has money in that investment, and so that can work out both ways. If you play it right, they're willing to let it go lower because they have a need for income versus the dealer doesn't. As much anyways. And then the difference here is that if you don't play it right, though, you can offend somebody fairly quickly and it can be done as well. So the difference here is the private inspection is going to be a lot more key than at a dealership. Shipping the car may also become an issue a little bit because schedules have to be aligned. You know, a person's schedule is not open 7 days a week like a dealership is. And then you're also going to have to worry about title transfers because all that stuff you're going to have to do yourself pretty much versus the dealer usually does that for you. So a lot of caution should be used here because there's a lot of scams across the US for cars that are cheaper, wire me money, this and that. You should never wire or you should never give people money, right? Until you've seen the car, you've met them, and you've actually kind of started doing business, ultimately knowing who you're doing business with. Don't take a chance. Ask for references, ask for reputation, look on forums, look online. One of the easiest ways to spot a scam. Easiest, Google the phone number you're given. Often other people have been scammed before or attempted to be scammed. It'll come up under different things, like they're selling different things, they're doing different things. Total scam, easy to spot. So, definitely look at buying privately a little bit different and then don't get scammed. So how do you actually spot a private scam? Everybody has a special story, which means like, oh, I bought this car for my daughter. She moved out of town and I moved myself out. And then I'm not there, but my wife will show you the car. And if everything's good, you'll wire me money and I'll send her the title, that kind of stuff. It's all bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Usually they look for ways to not have to meet you, so the lack of ability to meet is usually an indicator, and it's usually not local, and no references available. In other words, their references are other phone numbers that make no sense, that are not local and that are far. There's no correlation between the numbers, even though they say there is. So there's no history. You can't look up anywhere anything, so that's why it becomes kind of really difficult. Usually, if the deals are not local, that's because they're scams. So even though they're posted in Florida, the guy's in Delaware or he's in Nevada, you're like, why would you post in the classifieds in Florida, you know? And they'll tell you, oh yeah, I'm trying really hard to sell my car. That's a crock of shit. And then it's too good to be true, as in the value is significantly lower. So think about it. If someone could just walk into a CarMax, give up their car, and actually get the price they're asking you for, why the hell would they go through all the problems trying to list it and sell it when they can just walk in and do it? Either the car's fucked up and they're not telling you, or it's a total scam and they're trying to take your money and run with it. So exercise extreme caution when dealing with anything that may smell like a scam. And I'll tell you, with your intuition, you'll know. If it smells and looks like a scam, guess what? It most likely is a scam. So please be super cautious and don't fall for it. All right, so on the private sale, things are a little bit different, right? You're not going to purchase the car at wholesale. In some cases, you might get very, very close to it, even much lower than what the dealer can offer it to you at. And you're definitely not going to pay retail unless there's significant amounts of modifications that make it worthwhile. So here's some tips to making sure you're a better negotiator when going private. When you're not going to dealer, make sure you're finance ready, because here's the emotional connection that private sellers have. Whenever someone is trying to sell a car and it's dear to their heart and this isn't a business for them, they're just doing it because they had a car, they want to get rid of it and go to the next one. Whenever they do that, they're emotionally connected to that price, but cash talks, bullshit walks. So if you show up with something close enough, then they don't want the headache and they don't know what next client comes in, and they don't have a dealership to ensure 10 people a day will see their car. So definitely be finance ready. Or have cash in hand ready to go, ready to put a deposit or something. But I would just be finance ready so they know the deal is going to be done. Don't insult the person and lowball something ridiculously low. Instead, take the same approaches with the dealership. Take interest in the car, understand the car, provide comparables, and then go into, kind of the pricing conversation. And then distinguish between private sellers and independent dealers. What do I mean? A lot of private sellers do this as a business, similar to what I'm teaching you. I'm pretty much teaching you how to become an independent dealer, minus the licensing. So if you are dealing with other people like you, well, they know the game. So you don't have to go through all this bullshit if someone is in that business. So, if they have an independent dealer plate, like an ID plate, or run a few cars and don't identify themselves as a dealer, it's probably because they figured out how to flip cars as well. So you're probably going to be in a disadvantage there when it comes to buying a car, because you're not going to get it too low, and at the same time they're going to make something on it, but they're slick. So ultimately, once you get really good with the system, you end up becoming slick too, which is good for you. But at the same time, it can be quite a hard thing to have two slick people trying to negotiate. Ultimately, no one's going to be really happy, and one of you is going to have to kind of forfeit the winning hand. So if you try to stay away from them, unless they really have the car and you maybe are brokering the car or really see great value in the car they can't move that you need to have. Now let's look a little bit into the financing aspect. Even though we've talked about it a little bit, we're going to go more in detail into what the financing is and why financing just makes a lot more sense. So why does it make sense? Well, because like I said earlier, you're looking at rates where you're almost borrowing money for free. I remember I did a loan on an $80,000 Ferrari. $80,000 was the amount financed, and I got it at like 1.79. It was so ridiculously low that it made no sense to spend my own money. It's like someone is saying, borrow money from me. You don't have to pay me back the interest. Just pay me back on your terms. Why would you ever want to part with $100,000 out of your pocket when you can do that? How much should you put down? The least amount possible. And how long should you finance for it? In today's low interest rates, as long as you can. Let me tell you why. So how much money should you put down? Well, if you put the least possible, you keep more cash in reserve, right? And you don't need to put money down ultimately because it really doesn't do anything unless the value is like significantly different than what you need to put down, or that you really don't want to take on a $34,000 payment. If you're taking something on to move it, then you don't want to invest your own money in it. You just want to kind of borrow it, move it, and then pay it back. So how long should you finance for? Well, as long as you can, because the lower your payment, the more your cash flow is not impacted. So if you have, let's say, a payment that's running I'll give you a good example. So let's say you have an 84-month payment. So some places offer 72 to 84-month financing. So let's assume you have an 84-month payment and it's not impacting, where it's only impacting your rate by like 0.5% or 1%, but it's reducing your payment by like almost 15%. So your payment is less. The interest is not that much to begin with, so it's okay to take the rate hike, and you're not going to keep the car long enough, so you're not really going to pay the full amount of interest anyways. You're only going to pay it for a few months. But now your cash flow isn't impacted as much, so you're driving the car for a lot less each month than you would on regular conventional financing. Now, nothing keeps you from refinancing to a lower rate for a shorter time if at any time you want to, and nothing keeps you from paying off the car early if you really want to. So ultimately, there is no issue with taking out something longer as long as you know you're pretty much in control of the financing and you're not doing it because you can't afford the car. You're doing it because it makes good business sense. So the bank credit union financing, again, better rates than dealers on new and late model cars. It's just easier to finance through your bank or your credit union. Usually credit unions are much lower. Allow you to choose who you make your payments to, so you don't have to actually randomly have a loan sold to Wells Fargo and all your stuff is with SunTrust. You can kind of choose, which bank you want to go and who you want to actually pay. And again, some credit unions, now I've seen this very often, that credit unions offer financing up to 84 months on cars that are over like $30,000. And it may make a lot of sense for you to take that offer, especially if the rates are low. So no financing on older model cars, just like we talked about a second ago. On cars that are going to be over 10 years old, it's going to be hard to get them to finance. And then in most cases, you're going to have to wait 24, 48 hours to finally get everything done on your loan. So I would highly recommend that even though you may not want to lose the car, right? So put a deposit on the car, especially if you're pre-approved. And the dealer understands that you'll be back in 2 days. In most cases, they can even give you, They can even give you an actual car beforehand and with a promissory note that you'll pay them, especially if you've already been approved through their financing as well and you're just waiting on your check. So, in most cases, the dealer can do that. It just depends on how comfortable they are with the deal. All right, so let's look at private exotic car financing. Totally different than everything else. So we're talking about Woodside Credit here, which are Woodside Credit is a company that does long-term financing up to 144 months. There's other financing opportunities with Gateway that go long-term. Again, terms up to 144 months. Rates are much higher. Like I'll tell you, for example, I financed a car once for 120 months. The rate was 8% despite the low rate environment. They have very attractive lease options. Even though you can't really lease a used car, they've made that somewhat possible. They do the inspections themselves as well as you can, but they want to make sure that the car they're about to give a loan for is indeed in immaculate condition. However, as much as income verification you have done to actually go into, as much as income verification you have actually done to go into a house, you're going to have to do the same thing for a car, and you're going to need a big down payment. They have specials that run 10% down kind of scenarios, but for the most part, you would need 20 to 25% down to get that good rate and to get that outstanding car with the longer term you actually want. They do base their terms and lengths of time on the credit percentage, and the length of time you can finance the car is based on the model year of the car and its assessed value. So in other words, their job is to mitigate risk, go ahead and do the loan, and then sell it out. The most they want to do is sell loans under 96 months, because what they do is they want to go ahead 94 months, because what they want to go ahead and do is sell these loans to other banks that are willing to take longer terms than 72 or 84. but are not willing to take 120, 144. So most of their deals will go 96 months to 120. 120 to 144 will mainly be portfolio for them, meaning they're going to have to keep them in-house. They try to go away from those deals unless, again, the down percentage is good and the credit is immaculate. Again, so there is additional steps here required, and I would kind of stay away from these unless you really have to. These are also harder. They sometimes have prepayment penalties, which ultimately works well if you're trying to drive the car for yourself. Doesn't work well if you're trying to use this system to make money. So know your options before walking in. Be smart about the way you think about finance. So before you walk into the dealership, make sure you understand what are your options, what are you approved for, what are you not. Check your local bank and credit union rates before you go to the dealer. If the dealer is a special or is going to give you some better for financing with them because they're doing deals with a new bank, it may be better than what you can get yourself. Don't be the fool that walks out only to walk back in the next day. Because then the bank, then at that point, the dealer knows they got you, so they can raise up the rate 4%. Again, know what you're asking for. Like, don't ask for an 84-month rate for a 1.99. It's typically not going to happen. You might get that 84-month rate for maybe like 3.5%. That might be a more reasonable request to make. Understand what it means to have free money, meaning understand that when you are able to borrow under the 5% threshold for over $50,000, then it's a big deal, and that you are able to play with someone else's money, ultimately. But usually buy cars you'd want to keep for yourself in case you're stuck with them a little bit longer than expected. And then get pre-approved as many times as you want with as many banks as you want. Well, everybody thinks you lose a lot of points when you're actually, like people think you lose points when you actually apply every time for credit. You have 15 days, so within 14 days of actually applying, you can apply for the same thing, such as like a car loan, from as many banks as you want, and it'll only ding you once. Meaning that if you're trying to buy a car, but you want to get, like other people to run your credit because every dealership wants to run it and give you a loan, then you want to make sure that you can do that within 14 days and it won't matter. But it's the same for the home market, and you have 30 days for that. On the car market, you have a total of 15 days, which is 14 days from the day you actually applied for your first loan, to not lose any more points on your credit score. So, your time to actually pull the trigger. Find the car, inspect it, negotiate it, finance it, enjoy it, take care of it, enjoy it, and then stick to it in that same order. So that's how you actually continue to actually progress and be able to trade up. So the only thing missing on that, can you guess what it is? Well, the only thing missing on that, the absolute only thing, is how are you going to enjoy it? What are you actually going to do to enjoy it, to make sure you don't actually abuse it? And then make sure that you actually are capable of selling it. What I mean by that is make sure it stays away or in the shape that someone else would absolutely love it. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the rules of driving your car and the car usage rules as to how much you can drive it, what you shouldn't do with it, and what to be super careful of coming up. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how to actually get rid of it, because that's the whole point, so you can actually make some money on the actual deal itself. Credit is key based on a lot of the things that I've actually shown you here in terms of acquiring some of these cars, especially if you don't have the cash to actually buy some of these cars outright. And while it's very easy to get approved for a loan for most people that have good credit scores, it's going to become very expensive if you have a 600 credit score, between a 6 to 700 or below 600. And in some cases, it'll be very, very, very difficult to get financing, as a lot of places will not give you the financing you need in order to actually buy the car. So let's first talk about financing in general. Remember what I always talk about in terms of financing an exotic car. If you can borrow at under 3%, you're golden. And so therefore, you're better off using other people's money. In most cases, banks file the actual titles electronically, so they can be released within 3 days of a payoff. So selling the car won't be an issue. I've used this for quite a number of cars. Maybe I would say about 40 to 50% of my cars are financed. The other ones may have been other opportunities to buy cash. And again, as I've covered in the course, I recommend credit unions over the dealership. However, in some cases, based on your credit, the dealership might be an easier, quicker way to get the deal done. Now, for those of you that actually don't have good credit, I'm going to cover with you a very interesting way to boost your credit. We have actually partnered with betterautorates.com. I'm actually on the screen here. You're actually going to be able to follow me so I can kind of educate you on how this process works. It's not a law firm, and it's not by any means kind of a credit repair, but it's rather credit optimization. So what betterautorates.com does is they go into your credit and they fix three things. They dispute and resolve most of the errors on your actual record. In other words, there's a lot of things on your record that may not be errors, but could be looked at as errors, and therefore this particular company, Better Auto Rates, is very good at going out and getting those dropped, which immediately gives you a few points increase. In addition to that, the other thing they're notorious for is they're good at helping people with utilization, which a lot of times we don't realize that our credit score is floating, meaning that, in other words, at any given time it's pooled, it could change, 50, 100 points. It's just a question of what's on your credit at that moment. And if you're using your credit properly and your utilization ratios are good, then your credit's going to go higher. A lot of times, a lot of people are not familiar with what utilization is. And then finally, one of the biggest part of actually having like a credit optimization company like this is not only they're going to help your utilization, and not only you're going to get the benefit of having all of these errors omitted, but they're going to help you ultimately stay on course and enable you to get much, much better rates on future cars. So the whole goal is to pay them a flat one-time fee, and then from there be able to actually move forward and retain your credit. One of the benefits here is that your credit doesn't just go up and then falls off. They stay with you for a duration of 6 to 12 months to ensure that your credit does not go bad. They even negotiate debt if you have outstanding debt or charge-offs that you need negotiated. They negotiate it down for you. Very reliable company. I completely endorse them. And therefore, one of the main group that I recommend if you have average to below average credit and want to be up over 700. In most cases, people that have referred there have gained anywhere from 60 to 100 points within 90 days, which is great. And in a lot of cases, even bankruptcy people have been able to be back into car loans within 6 to 8 months. So I would definitely start there if your credit's not good, but just leverage credit as much as you can to buy 1 to 2 cars at a time, but don't overextend yourself. Make sure you're in a position to be able to afford the payments comfortably and continue to make your payments as you undergo this process of trying to sell the cars. Hopefully this has been helpful and it's giving you a good insight on how to actually go and boost your credit. If you want to do this yourself, you don't obviously have to hire them. You can do so yourself very easily. The only recommendation I've had if you're doing this is make sure that however you decide to pull your credit report, don't fall for those like places like myfreecreditreport.com, etc. Instead, go directly to the credit bureau and actually pull your own record. You can do so once a year for free. Once you have those records, it's a matter of you can find the templates on Google and actually send out letters to dispute your own errors, as well as kind of you can Google utilization of credit and understand a little bit about how to actually stay in the right utilization ratio so that you can boost your own credit. If you're really not familiar with it, I've used this people quite often back in the day. In my banking days, but so again, something good to have under your belt if you need to boost your credit.